Well, hey.
Wow, that was some jazzy music. I wasn't expecting that.
It was good music, yeah. And well, welcome everyone. And a big welcome to Tom Brown from Toledo, who's going to give us some insights into how the TA process works. And our title today is The Playbook TA Never Gave You, the New Rules of Winning Business from TA. And I'm really pleased that we've got together, Tom, because TA on the negative side can be seen as the new blockers. And I think you're going to give us a bit of an overview of the landscape and some secrets and some insights into how we can really build relationships with this group of hopefully collaborators with recruiters as well. So now a bit of a spoiler alert. Dear Tom was in Reading yesterday, face to face with one of his new clients, had a full day with them. He then went to London to catch up with Bobby Banerjee, which is always a dangerous thing. Yeah. You had a mini curry club, and then you had to you were killing time to get to Luton Airport.
Yeah,
where you spent the whole night waiting for your plane. So you've had no sleep, but a lot of coffee. So
my plane was first thing this morning, and instead of getting a hotel, I decided to spend 7 hours in Luton Airport, as you do. So if I'm not making sense, it's blame the lack of sleep. But
I think we're ready to go. I think you're going to push through your slides.
Absolutely.
Feel free to put any questions in the comments in the Q&A, and I'll cover those with Tom at the end. Tom, take it away. And Nisha, I know you're in the background. Get those slides going. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for the intro. And look, a lot of this will go against the grain of what recruitment agencies have been taught about business development, right? And this is business development training, what I do, but I'm not a salesperson, right? I'm a failed recruiter, right? Let's go straight in with that misconception. I'm a failed recruiter. I've been in TA for 15 years. And although this is business development training, this is coaching on how to win conversations with TA. I'm not a sales trainer, and this is more language therapy more than anything, right? So that's why I'm here. I'm training recruitment agencies. So back to your original point there, Simon. TA being collaborators, I would say TA teams are more than collaborators. TA teams, in my experience, are the buyers of recruitment agency services, and that's certainly becoming more and more commonplace. They are buyers of recruitment agency services. We need recruitment agency services. We are the key decision makers. It's not a hard and fast rule. You're always going to get nuances. You're always going to get differences. You're going to get companies where the hiring managers are the decision makers, despite there being a TA team. But for the most part, the TA teams are the decision makers. So TA historically has been sold to by recruitment agencies, right? This is data from my 15 years in TA, right? I've received tons of emails, cold emails, good, bad, ugly, from recruitment agencies. But TA doesn't want to be sold to, because we're not looking to partner with good salespeople. We just need amazing recruitment partners. So we need recruitment partners who aren't going to disrupt, our process, and who are going to add true value. So the Toledo approach is about giving agencies who are hitting a brick wall by pitching to TA the chance to win the market share of TA teams who do use agencies. So the market share of TA teams who actually want to use agencies. But the reason why you're hitting a brick wall is because TA teams are hearing the same things every day from recruitment agencies, and that's why we're ignoring the pitches. And most agencies are feeling it right now in 2025 for the same reason that there's a ton of really good TA partners out on the market looking for work. Really, really good recruitment agencies are struggling to find business. So business development is hard right now, but this helps you not blend into the noise. So what are the issues? Why the old way fails, right? So many agencies have been trained since the dawn of time and are still trained to bypass TA, bypass HR, pitch straight to hiring managers. And that works, right? That works. Pitching CVs to hiring managers works because hiring managers' pain points are candidates. Hiring managers' pain points are CVs. But TA's pain points are something else entirely, as well as CVs. So the old way, very much self-focused emails. So emails that start with I, we, we've, we do this. A big one I see is, I'm not going to give you the usual agency spiel. That is the usual agency spiel. It's all elevator pitch email straight away. That's why TA is ignoring the email, because we don't want to be pitched to. A lot of agencies competing on price and leading with candidate supply. And then we've got LinkedIn, right? Not all agencies do this, not many agencies do this, but on LinkedIn, a lot of agencies are posting for other agencies, are posting for other recruitment consultants, are posting about billings, deal wins, lunch clubs, these kind of things. And that alienates your ideal client profile, that alienates TA teams. And we've all seen the passive aggressive LinkedIn posts who are moaning about TA teams who don't use agencies. You wouldn't do your own plumbing. We've seen the posts, right? There is a better way with LinkedIn. So TAs are blockers, and this is why that you feel TAs are blockers. We're not shutting you out because we don't need agency support. We just, as I said, we've heard it all before, and we don't need to be sold that recruitment works. If you're a recruitment agency, if you're a recruitment consultant, I'm going to assume that you're probably a good recruiter. My main worry about what you can do is I'm concerned about whether you can truly partner with us, you can truly add value and not disrupt. So stop leading with candidates, stop leading with recruitment. In order for you to win conversations with TA, you need to be talking about something else completely, their world. I've heard over the years, having a laugh with Avanti yesterday about this, I've heard over the years TA teams being referred to as the DPOs, the deal prevention officers. I'm sure everyone's heard that, right? But in my mind, the common misconceptions that agencies have about TA teams are the real deal prevention officers. So common misconceptions I hear all the time is TA doesn't care about cost. It's not their money. TA does care about costs. We have tight budgets, and that doesn't mean to say that we are not going to use agencies. That might mean we're not going to use agencies for all of our vacancies. We're going to use agencies strategically according to our budget. Another big one is TA doesn't want to work with agencies. We do want to work with agencies. We're desperate to partner with really, really good agencies. Going around TA to hiring managers is the only way to get work. That's a common misconception. It is a way to get work. I would argue that is a way to get quick wins and not long-term partnerships. And that's what we're talking about. TA teams are looking for long-term partnerships. TA teams are blockers. We're definitely not blockers. The only time we might be blockers is if a TA team definitely doesn't use an agency, and that's okay. We just move on, and as I said at the beginning, we just need to find the market share of TA teams who do use agencies. So being on the PSL guarantees work. That doesn't necessarily guarantee work. It doesn't necessarily guarantee all of the vacancies. A lot of the time, TA teams don't like having a PSL because it causes them work. So when you're pitching to get onto a PSL, we don't want to add another recruitment agency onto our PSL. If we've got 10 recruitment agencies on our PSL, even 5 recruitment agencies on our PSL, that's 5 or 10 recruitment agencies that we have to manage. That's 5 or 10 more sources of candidates that we have to manage. And the larger the PSL, the more CVs you get exponentially, because everyone knows that they're competing against other agencies. So the candidate quality tends to drop. my preference is to have a really small PSL of maybe one or two really good agencies. So a common misconception, as we said, about LinkedIn is we stand out by talking about ourselves, our candidates, and our fees in our outreach on LinkedIn. TA does care about what you post on LinkedIn. We would love to see insightful posts on LinkedIn, case studies on LinkedIn about a time that an agency has truly helped outside of just recruitment, truly partnered with a TA team. Big misconception is that, you know, TA, internal recruiters are failed recruiters, so TA is easier than agency recruitment. It's not. It's just very different, and we're dealing with different things. And my favorite is that TA teams don't or won't headhunt, and that comes across in a lot of messaging that we see from agency emails, from agency LinkedIn posts. Some of the best headhunters I know are internal. Whenever I work internally, I always headhunt. I always use LinkedIn Recruiter. I like to use Juicebox a lot more. Big misconception is we just put out adverts and hope we get the good candidates apply. So just to reflect on that a little bit. So why is there so much tension? Agencies feel TA are restrictive, and TA feels that agencies are disruptive. And we need to meet in the middle. And this is what Talivo is all about. The historic behaviors of bypassing TA, ignoring processes, flooding our inboxes with spec CVs, that puts our back up almost all the time. So we do want to partner with agencies, but only if they respect our processes. And in turn, we respect your processes as well. You know, candidate feedback, and you know, we will always fight for candidate feedback. That's a big one from agencies. Is I never hear back from the TA team in time. You're chasing us for feedback. We want feedback from the hiring manager on your CV as well, because we have roles to fill. And if we're using an agency to fill those roles, we're using an agency for a reason. So we want you to succeed, because for those 2 roles that you're working, I might have 8 roles that I'm working, or 8 roles that my team is working. So back to processes. I won't go into it in too much detail because we'll be literally here forever. But what do those processes look like? And why do we need to know the processes? Why do agencies need to know this? Because most agencies only sell on sourcing, and that is one step of a 14-step process that we are dealing with. So TA teams, our world is more complex than just filling jobs. And believe it or not, you as agencies can add value at every single stage, starting from the planning stage. But on the flip side of that, agencies can and have disrupted every single stage, and that is frustrating. So when you understand our world, trusted partners win more business. So as I said, there are 14 stages in the end-to-end TA process, and you can break that down into 4 phases. So you've got planning, and that's where the sort of workforce planning happens, the prioritization of the roles, the approvals, sign off, the hiring manager brief. And then you've got the attraction stage phase, which is of course sourcing, screening, selection, employer branding is a big part of that. Obviously, we've got the stage where we are looking at job adverts, job descriptions, making sure we're not using outdated legacy job descriptions, making sure we are up to date with the terminology. And then, of course, you've got the assessment stage, which is everything from interviews, tech tests, candidate engagement, and then the offer and onboarding stages, which is just offers, onboarding, and then post-hire evaluation. And as I said, agencies can add value in some way at every single one of those stages. I would also argue that agencies can commercialize at some of those stages outside of sourcing, and that's what we dig deeper into in the Talibo approach training. One of the many things. So we're dealing with the 14-stage TA process, right? And as I said, you can disrupt at every single stage. An example of that is the classic specking CVs into the hiring manager. And I'll explain that, because when we get a job on, what we do, we brief the role with the hiring manager, as you would as an agency. You would brief the role with the hiring manager. So let's say we brief the role with the hiring manager on the Monday, and we say, right, we are going to work this role as a TA team directly. This week, I'm going to reach out to the market, reach out to candidates, source candidates, and then by Thursday, I'm going to deliver my shortlist to you. So on the Monday, I book in for Thursday a shortlisting session with the hiring manager. That happens. Most TA teams do that. So when a spec CV comes in on a Wednesday, to a stressed out hiring manager whose pain points is candidates, and some hiring managers go rogue and forget about process. That's not on you, that's on them. And a hiring manager comes to me and says, "No, don't worry about it. I've got this CV from an agency. They look really good. We're probably going to go with it. Don't want any more CVs." I, as the TA, I have wasted 3 of my days sourcing. I've got a shortlisting session booked in for Thursday, and I could have been doing other things. Also, 9 times out of 10, if that hiring manager does use an agency, that budget's coming out of my budget, not their budget. But why should you care about that? Why should you care about disrupting our process? Because when that hiring manager comes to me and says, "Right, yeah, we want to hire this person," if we manage to get it past procurement, if we manage to agree terms, because at the end of the day, in most part, TA teams are still the decision makers, we will reluctantly pay the invoice. But that's it. We'll leave it there. There will be no ongoing relationship. There will be no long-term partnership. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, because I know that there are agencies who have won partnerships by bypassing TA and then schmoozing TA through the back door. I'm just giving you a better way to do it, and that is always through TA. I won't go into the other stages where you can disrupt, because, well, as I said, we'll be here forever. So inside the mind of a stressed out head of TA. So this is really good for agencies to understand as well, because these are things, just like the misconceptions, just like the processes, these are things that you can reference in your outreach, right? Oh, I understand you are dealing with a hiring budget. You are dealing with pressure from stakeholders. You are dealing with having to balance protecting your employer brand and candidate experience and providing a hiring manager, a positive hiring manager experience. Hiring manager experience is something that agencies can really help with us with, right? But it's something that's also forgotten about, not really spoken about, because candidate experience takes center stage. So this is what's keeping them up at night, and surprise placements and agency fees that weren't planned, that weren't in the budget. It comes from spec CVs direct to hiring managers. Talk a little bit about objections, right? Because we've all had objection handling training, and a lot of objections when a head of TA says we don't use agencies, they might mean, or 9 times out of 10, if they do use agencies, they mean we do use agencies. It's just you haven't convinced us that you're the agency for us, because you have pitched to us, you have led with candidates, you have led with recruitment. We don't need convincing that all of that works. Genuinely, the TA team might not use agencies, and that's okay. Just move on. A lot of agencies would look at that. Okay, if the TA team doesn't use agencies, they'll then go to the hiring manager, but then you're at risk of going back and not getting that backdoor deal signed off, as it were. The head of TA might be already using other agencies. We have a PSL. Now, I have objection handling training on the PSL agency, the PSL objection from a TA point of view. That TA team might have, or they might be, an embedded solution, and then they're definitely not using agencies, because an embedded talent company will never use an agency. The bigger RPOs will, of course, and maybe the larger sort of embedded talent companies might, but for the most part, absolutely not. They might only use agencies for niche roles or overflow. They might genuinely have run out of budget for that year. One thing to bear in mind with these, when you're objection handling, when you're reaching out, is TA partners, as I've said, they can recruit, they can headhunt. So in my experience, TA teams don't typically use agencies because of a lack of internal sourcing capability. And that is something really worth remembering when you're doing your outreach. As I said, remember, this is all about TA first outreach. This is all about TA empathetic outreach. So a little bit more about objection handling. I said this yesterday on-site training, right? You know, you've all been on your objection handling training, right? So, you know, when a TA person, head of TA says, we have a PSL, you come back with, but we don't want to be on your PSL, right? It's a classic. But guess who else have been on objection handling training? TA teams, because a lot of us are from an agency background. So we've had the objection handling training. And if we haven't, we've been on the receiving end of it enough to know when you're handling our objections. So things like we have a PSL, instead of saying, but we don't want to be on your PSL, start asking questions, right? Start asking about our pain points outside of the PSL. Okay, you have a PSL for sourcing, but you might not have a PSL for an agency to go to if you need insights on salary data to get an approval across the line. You can also start, if you've got a good enough conversation going or good enough rapport, start asking questions about that PSL. And I'm sure you do, right? You know, how's that PSL doing? You know, what impact is having many agencies having on your process? I'd imagine having 10 agencies on the PSL is really having an impact with judging. So this is what we see. This is, again, based on data from what I've seen over the years and what fellow heads of TA and TA people have seen over the years. So I run a TA community called Totally TA. We're growing. We've got sort of over nearly 700 members globally. All of our Tolevo clients, when they sign up and when they've completed the course, you get to go on a preferred supplier list, a sort of recommended agency list, which is within the TA community. So I do speak to a lot of TAs about this and about what they're seeing and getting example emails from them. And it's all the same. It's all pitches. It's all, we are experts in your industry. We have the best talent on the market. We've got a great track record. A lot of agencies just going with the pitch, but then it had a PDF or an attachment to the initial email. I'm not reading that. You know, no one's reading an attachment. We'll watch a Loom video. We'll listen to a voice note. We'll definitely listen to agencies who reference our pain points outside of recruitment. A big thing as well I'm seeing in outreach and on LinkedIn posts is you won't fill that role internally. We are experts. And the we are experts line is a funny one because I always push back and say, well, You might be industry experts in your industry, but if a TA partner's been at a company long enough, not necessarily long enough, but they are also experts. They are experts in not only their industry, but maybe that type of role, but they're experts in their company as well. So they are experts on things that recruitment agencies can't tell from our job spec, you know. So a recruitment agency said, saying I've got the perfect candidate for that company, but the TA team are blocking my contact. Well, how do you know you've got the perfect candidate? How do you know their culture? How do you know their salary? How do you know their working pattern? Whether it's hybrid, it's remote, it's full time in the office. You don't have the perfect candidate until you've had that true hiring manager brief, until you've partnered with that TA team. And we're hearing this all the time. They are forgettable and they don't make you stand out. So TA first outreach, what works? As I said, so start to refer to our true pain points. So reference our world, our process, not your candidates. A really good one to do, and I've sort of tested it myself with some outreach I did for when I was sort of selling myself as a TA contractor at the end of last year, is leveraging the common misconceptions, leveraging the common mistakes that agencies and recruitment companies are making with outreach from an empathetic point of view, sometimes from a jokey point of view, right? You know, hey, look, I am a recruitment consultant, but don't panic. I'm not expecting a CV. I just want to find out more about, you know, what's going on in your world at the moment. A big thing that I get asked is, how do I stay in touch? How do I build a relationship? Because this approach is a slow burn, right? And I know a lot of agencies at the moment just want to get jobs on, right? And historically, agencies have been trained to get jobs on, right? Make a phone call. The goal of your phone call is to get a job on. The goal of your emails to get a job on. That's why we're speccing CVs. That's why we're leading with candidates. But staying in touch and staying on top of mind without being pushy doesn't necessarily mean sending a message every month saying, have you got any jobs? Have you got any vacancies? We haven't spoken for a few weeks. You know, how are things? Are things getting busier? Leveraging LinkedIn is massive. And a lot of recruitment agencies don't post on LinkedIn because they don't see it as business critical activities for client acquisition. I would argue that it's the opposite, right? So as a head of TA, if I'm getting pitched by an agency, one of the first things I do is I'm going to jump on to LinkedIn, have a look at the posts and see if I feel safe reaching back out, right? And if there are no sort of, you know, posts on case studies about how they've helped other TA teams or how they've truly helped and added value with other companies, I'm not going to see them as an extension of my TA team, which is what your ultimate goal is, not to necessarily get jobs on, is to be an extension of your client's TA team. And that will naturally get you jobs on, but you're in there. It's sort of like you want to be like, not full embedded talent, obviously, but like, you know, contingency, a halfway house between contingency with a little bit of going towards those embedded value added services. So there's lots you can do on LinkedIn. I've got a guide on this as well. So, you know, sharing useful insights, salary trends, the usual, commenting on heads of TA posts. You can do searches on, I'm sure you know, you can do searches on Sales Navigator where you look up your ICP, and you can look up who's posted in the last 24 hours or 7 days, you know, so you can comment with useful insights and your own opinions on that. Max out your connection requests as well, and be really, really picky with who you're connected with, because it's all well and good. Obviously, you've got to connect with candidates and your colleagues, but if you're getting inbound connection requests from people you feel that they're going to sell to you, just as we do in TA, just be choosy with who you accept. But max out your connection requests as well. LinkedIn gives you 20 a day, 100 a week, and map out who you want to speak to in TA. Map that out very carefully as well. So a big mistake that agencies make is reaching out to TA partners, individual contributor, internal recruiters, TA admins, HR admins, all of these people. All of these people are fine to engage with on LinkedIn, because if they see your posts and they comment on your posts, the TA decision makers will see there is their engagement. But you don't want to be reaching out to anyone, I would say, below TA lead level. Individual contributor TAs will have their own rec load. They're already at a stage where they are the strategy. They are the strategy for that vacancy. So they're not going to be looking for agency support. It's the heads of TA, it's the chief people officers, the TA directors. I would really limit yourself to segmenting your industry to those sort of job titles and around those levels. Another good thing to offer, once you start to understand TA, once you start to learn the Tolevo approach, is lead magnets, right? TA related lead magnets, which I go into in further detail on Tolevo. Posting LinkedIn content about our challenges is a big one. And yes, you can keep posting about agency wins, but I'll keep it to an absolute minimum, because that's not what we want to read about. You might want to share that with your fellow recruitment consultant network, but when you do, you're just going to get engagement from your peers, which isn't client acquisition. So if you stay noisy and stand out on LinkedIn the right way, your outreach will feel familiar. So you do two-pronged approach. So you stay TA empathetic, TA first on LinkedIn, and when you do reach out, it's not cold anymore. It's not cold. It's cold inbound. So I think that's it, Simon. This is not, just in summary, this is not a silver bullet, right? This is not, as I said, you're not going to sort of win roles instantly with the Tolevo approach. You will eventually. It's just a better way of business development with TA teams. It positions you to win the share of business that is out there with the TA teams who do genuinely want to work with really, really reliable recruitment partners. It will still take effort, as business development does, right? Persistence, resilience. You might need to use some technology, outreach technology. I've dabbled in the growth machine, can highly recommend it. But with the Tolevo approach, you won't sound like everyone else. So what you'll learn from the Tolevo approach will definitely what you want, right? How to win business with TA teams, how to commercialize TA's pain points outside of just sourcing, why we use agencies, why we don't use agencies. That's a massive one. You know, I sometimes get heads of TA on talking about why they're scaling back on agency use, why they're not using agencies anymore. That's really important for you to understand. How startups are leaning on agencies as well as first generation TA users. I've been head of TA for startups and scale up, so I've been there. Why the old way is failing you, of course, with TA, and how to stand out, go up as a long-term partner, not just as a transactional vendor. How to stop selling recruitment and start selling solutions. Hopefully you've taken things away from today's session. You've taken your first step in your journey to see how TA really works and what we really care about. You challenge your old habits and realize that if you position yourself as a true partner, you'll win business. So what is Tolevo in more detail? Happy to pick up on obviously on calls offline, but it's a platform. We've got on-demand videos. I've got a cold email playbook, which is like an entry-level product, which I'm about to launch. So it's a combination of 13 and 14 videos, and then a playbook with examples of language you can use. But the core product virtually is a cohort of TA First business development training. So over 12 weeks, every other week, there's a hour of 90-minute sessions, so 6 sessions, and coupled with one-to-one support from myself and community support on the platform. But I also do on-site training as well. I had a great day yesterday teaching 14 recruitment consultants, shifting their mindset from the old ways to the new ways. The feedback so far is really good. And here's what others have said, right? So I've got one client who has won 110 grand's worth of perm pipeline just purely using the Tolevo approach. And not only that, it gives you confidence and the language to show up differently in front of TA teams and stop getting ignored. One lady, based on my free workshop, didn't really find the content or advice useful, but then again, she admitted she missed the last 30 minutes. I thought I'd chuck that in there for a bit of balance. And another guy, I know he's on this call. I think he secured 2 or 3 new TA clients, which ended up one of them being worth £3,000 a week in contract runners. And that was actually just from a LinkedIn Live initially. Now I'm working with him closer. So final slide, I promise. Why don't you BD me, right? So connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not connected. Send me your best pitch, right? Either the old way or pitch me with things that you've learned from today. And I'll tell you whether you'll get ignored or why you're being ignored, and then we can chat about fixing.
Tom, that's great, and I love that last element of this would be good practice for people on the call today, and we've got nearly 100 on the call, to pitch to you as a TA person, and for them to get some feedback directly from you on what was right, what was wrong, and what how they could do things better. I shared with you earlier, my daughter's recently returned from Sydney, working in recruitment over there for 2.5, 3 years. She was in recruitment over here for 2 years, and she's gone internal to a legal firm not far from where I am. And she said to me the other day, she said, the quality of engagement and pitches I get from recruitment is immensely. Some are awful and some are really good. Her company actually puts on their website, I shared with you, we welcome applications from recruitment companies because they're in the legal market and they're struggling to find the talent. Lawyers are risk averse, so they don't move very much. But she said, I was amazed at how bad some people are and how rude they are, how recruiters, and they don't follow process. Someone that's on their PSL, she gave the process to, and he completely ignored it and fired in 6 candidates. She said, what we really want from you to start with is if you send your best 3, and later on the day, he sent 6. She said at least 4 were completely irrelevant. My soon-to-be son-in-law, who she met in Sydney, he's now gone EY for, I won't mention the name. It's one of the big 4 accountancy firms globally, and he said we've got one recruitment company on our PSL that supports my division, and he said I'm not really happy with them. And he went to his boss and said, look, I could find better recruitment businesses to do this. And actually, he was really perturbed that, and I think this might be a frustration that other people find. His boss said, look, we don't want to deal with more recruitment companies. We'll stick with these guys. And I won't say his name because it might get out, but he said, we need to expand this. Because if we want the best people, we've got to have the best recruitment company. So he's having that battle with his boss at the moment. but I think sometimes that works. And he's a really professional recruiter and understands, and a bit like my daughter, what good looks like. And it's a bit frustrating if you're on the other side of the fence. You know, Andy Dunn really well, was a brilliant recruiter before he set up his own business. And then when COVID hit, he went internal. He said it was one of the best things he ever did. It really honed his skills in a different way, dealing with talent with a major global corporation. So we should have a lot more respect as recruiters for TA. They're not useless recruiters or failed recruiters. They're just doing things differently. And I love the idea of partnership. I've got a couple of questions that you talked about the times that TA would use third parties or recruitment companies to support. You said time to hire was a key thing. And I guess that's variable depending on what. I watched Hisham Azuz did a great one of his LinkedIn live, one of his live podcasts, and there was a digital company there in cybersecurity that said we win all our business now on our proof of time to hire because we're about 10 days faster than the whole of the competition. So how is that? How does, if you can prove a measurable on that, is that a real game changer for recruiters? Or is it a good question to ask? It is
absolutely, and it has been for quite a few years. But I've seen more recent debates, especially in a market where we are overwhelmed with candidates, right? It's a candidate-heavy market, right? So at the moment, it is about time to hire, but it's balancing that time to hire with quality of hire as well. Yeah. So I think, yes, reference time to hire, but I think if quality of hire, the balance gets referenced as well.
Yeah.
Because time to hire suggests that, right, we can fill your jobs quickly, right? Yeah. And although that is, from a business point of view, we need these people, to start it. But we don't want it to be rushed, right? We don't want to get the wrong hire. So time to hire is, as I said, needs to be balanced with quality of hire as well, without rushing. Yeah,
you mentioned a point quite at the end there on commercializing some pain points.
Yes,
I give you an example that would I know a company that was hiring recently. This is a non-recruitment business, and they were hiring for a manager, and they put some ads out, and TAs and HR were going to manage that process. They got 178 CVs in a week, and one of our members. We're in discussion with them to break through the door, and they said, "How are you going to work through that?" And they said, "It's a flipping nightmare." We've sort of got 3 lists, and in the end, our team member said, "Look, give us the CVs. They really qualified the role." Yeah. And they qualified the person, which you referred to earlier, talking about everything. And they said, what we'll do is we'll give you a short list and we'll give you a second list. And we'll do that for, I think they did it for £1,500. But they had the resources and the time to take away and do that. But they asked the key questions for an overrun internal talent team with other jobs that had a really key management role to fill, and didn't want to miss some good talent in those 176 CVs. But they ended up with a short list of 5 and a second list of 5, which was the maybes. And they interviewed 2 from the 5 and 1 from the maybe. They shortlisted, and one of the shortlists got the job. And they got a little bonus. They put in a little clause: if one of these gets, can we have a little bonus on top? So, but what they did is they got their foot in the door.
Exactly. You've kind of stolen my thunder there, Simon, because that's a big one I talk about a lot. I'm talking about that for quite a few months now, and it's an embedded or non-embedded, actually, a sourcing, inbound service, right? And the best way to pitch that is the same way you would have pitched a candidate when you see a role being advertised, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of reverse the pitch. You kind of see a role being advertised, or I see you're advertising for a software developer. I'm not going to do the usual agency thing of giving you or specing you a CV for it, because you'll no doubt flood it. But how are you managing that inbound, and how are you curating your shortlist? You reference things like you're protecting your employer brand, you're protecting your candidate experience, and that's great. £1,500 for an inbound management service. But the thing is, the TA team has got to give you a lot of trust. There has to be a lot of trust there, right? Because for the most part, that agency needs to have proper access to the ATS, right? Partnership, and as you say, look, at the end of the day, if you curate the list and no one on the list is suitable, okay, well, let's start finding candidates then.
That's not a service. Okay.
But that's just an extension of the TA team. I did want to acknowledge Gavin's point there, right? Because it was a really good point.
Wasn't it? Yeah. Did you see it?
It's something that I get asked all the time, right? And as I said earlier, you get good hiring managers, you get bad hiring managers who go outside of process. You get agencies who go outside of process. You get agencies who respect the process, and you do get TA teams that don't partner with agencies properly, right? But that blows my mind. When I partner with agencies, when I give a role to an agency, I would always want to set them up for success. I would always want to work with them properly and respect their processes and how they work. And I suppose this is very much the difference between, from your point of view as an agency, a good client versus a bad client. Do you put all your effort into a bad client who's going to sort of block you from processes, who's going to be slow, or do you say kind of walk away from that bad client because the TA team is not willing to listen to the agency's process and desires, and then focus on standing out to win that good client? But it is such a good point. Someone even suggested, you should do training to TA teams, and I'd love to do training to TA teams on how to partner with agencies, but I'm not sure TA teams are there for that. Most TA teams would turn around and say, "Well, no, we know that," and there's no financial benefit, like a direct financial benefit. It's something that needs to be talked about, right? This harmonious relationship of TA and agency. I had an idea for the Rec Expo, actually. I think it's coming up in October. It's probably too late now. I had this idea of getting literally a round table, and having 3 recruitment consultants or a mixture of recruitment consultants and agency owners, and 3 heads of TA, and a mix of heads of TA who only use agencies, doesn't use agencies, and have a conversation, have a debate, have it out, as it were, right?
Tom, we'll do a webinar on that. We'll do a LinkedIn Live on that.
Brilliant.
We'll pick three of our members that work with TA teams and have experience at doing that, and we'll invite some TAs to come on board. I just gave you some example. I know a couple, but hundreds. But on that last point, I think there's a good question that Gavin sort of prompted there, and you used the phraseology. If I was Gavin and I was sort of talking to a TA member who wasn't really working with me, a phrase you used was, how can we work? How can I work with you? How can we work together so that I'm set up for success? So teach me your processes, the way you work, so that I make it easy for you to support me in this search for talent, because you've got these jobs, you desperately need talent to support your management. I want to succeed with you on this, and you tick the box with your hiring managers, and we start to build a relationship of trust, complete trust with each other, so that we understand exactly what the goals are and what the timescales are, so that we're, as you said, so that we're both set up for success. That's a good question for a TA.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's like any relationship, one of the recruiters on the course yesterday said, I want to book in a weekly catch up with my client, with my TA client. But a lot of the times TAs either cancel last minute or they don't want to book in a weekly catch up. And I said, well, it's like any relationship. Take a step back. Why do you want a weekly catch up? If you are in constant contact with them about the process, you won't need that weekly catch up, right? If you are truly adding value to their process, being an extension of their TA team, they'll know it.
Good. Can I just ask a couple more questions that you had when roles not covered by TA? I used to work in the fascinating world of health and safety recruitment, which made up 0.02% of the working population. So when TA got health and safety jobs, it was like, where do we look for these people? So we were lucky in my old company of principal people who are team members to sort of support lots of TA teams with health and safety candidates. But a lot of the time they tried and failed because some of them didn't want to let go of jobs. So, and that was a bit of a weaker education from our point of view with those TA teams to say, we can help with this. They thought they could handle that. But the other thing you also mentioned was defining overflow. So can you define overflow? Because that's when TAs look elsewhere. And how can recruitment companies engage with those TA businesses to understand the roles that are not covered, and B, understand the sort of the workflow of those organizations, because there might be peaks and troughs annually. Is it just about asking lots of questions and beginning to understand those businesses?
It's about, so going back to my point about trying to win jobs from the first email. Those conversations will come organically, sort of when you jump on a call with them, right? Okay. So those kind of questions are the kind of like secondary and tertiary questions that agencies should be asking, right? But going back to overflow, right, especially in 2025, right, and overflow is a really big one because in 2025, a lot of the time, not a hard and fast rule, but heads of TA are reluctant to hire more permanent TA people in their team, right? So spikes and troughs in recruitment are, getting shorter, right? A few years ago, everyone was recruiting. So TA teams were really, really expanding. They were hiring. And then 2023, they were making redundancies. So now there are companies who are hiring heads of TA who need to look at their capacity of their team. But instead of hiring extra perm TA partners who might be made redundant further down the line if the roles get filled or there's no more roles coming in, they are turning on third-party companies. But as I keep saying, third-party companies who are going to act as an extension of their TA team. So sometimes they use embedded talent, sometimes they use TA contractors. TA contractors are okay. You can't really set up any SLAs. You've got to manage them. But this is where agencies can come in. There is a formula. There was a formula based on my capacity needs and a lot of my TA colleagues' capacity needs. There's a certain number of roles that a one TA partner can handle. And so, when you can have a look at a company, have a look at how many roles they have, how many TA partners they have, and you can kind of roughly work out whether they would need agency support there and there. And that's why I talk about overflow. But these are questions that you can start prodding around with.
Cool. Well, thank you very much indeed. And you did, how can you just give us a tip or a couple of guidance areas where you could commercialize some of those pay points? I sort of referred to one with one of our team members doing the research on the high volume applications. But is there other areas that that our listeners and our watchers could commercialize any pain points? What examples have you seen that have worked for TA and your clients?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? Right, without giving too much away, a massive one would be employer branding. Right, that's huge. Yeah. Most agencies do employer branding for their brand. A lot of agencies spend money on employer branding. A lot of agencies have put together videos for their employer branding. That's something that you could go and help and charge a fee for finding a videographer. So that's a good starting point.
Yeah, excellent. Well, look, Tom, great to have you. You stayed awake as well, which is fantastic. You've been awake for about 48 hours now, haven't you?
Yeah, about that. Yeah,
in 2 countries. So thank you very much for joining us again today. A great session, lots of guidance. Don't forget, everyone, make a pitch to Tom as a TA person and you as a recruiter, and he'll reply back to you with some good points, bad points, etc. And didn't you have an offer for the best one you were going to get?
Yes, yeah, the best one gets a free coaching session.
Hey, come on, you lot. Let's start pitching to Tom and have a free session with him for the best one you get. So hone those skills. Tom, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you. I might see you at Rec Expo then in Birmingham.
Yeah, if I get down there, yeah. And I think I'm seeing you in September in London.
Of course you are. Forgot all about that. September the 18th. All right. Looking forward to that, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Bye for now. See you again soon.
Thanks, Cheers. Everyone.
Bye. One minute to